Hello to all astrology enthusiasts. Today I want to discuss the upcoming new moon in the sign of Cancer, which will take place on June 25, 2025. This astrological event will occur at the 4th degree of Cancer at 1331. It will open a period that will last until January 3, 2026. And the waxing moon will be active until July 10, 2025. Traditionally, before we discuss the specifics of this new moon, let me remind you that in general, the new moon has a very interesting effect on our lives. And the energy of this astrological event undoubtedly changes our lives, at least every 2 weeks. Well, first of all, the new moon is actually the beginning of a new cycle, which is associated with the lunar phase when the sun and moon come together at the same degree of a particular zodiac sign. And I would immediately point out that this conjunction actually shows us the merging of our subconscious and conscious minds. In other words, this is the moment when we receive a certain amount of energetic information from the subconscious. And over the next 6 months, we will express this information through specific experiences in our lives. Of course, it depends on which house of your horoscope the new moon occurs in. And in this way, we understand which areas of life this astrological event will affect for each of you. Energetically, the new moon is a 0 point, a moment of silence, a kind of reset of our inner concentration. It is clearly not about action, not about outward activity, as for example happens during the full moon or the waxing moon. Rather, it is about tuning in to your inner voice, to the inner impulse from which the manifestation of something real in our lives will later be born. In other words, it is a kind of seed that we plant deep within our psyche, and it bears fruit over the next 6 months, that is, until the next full moon in the same zodiac sign. And moreover, if we are talking about an eclipse, then the new moon works for us in a much more long-term way in the context of eclipse. That is, it lasts for a minimum of 2 years and up to 9 or even 18.5 years. Nevertheless, the peculiarity of the new moon is that it marks the beginning of a new stage in our lives. It is a moment of renewal, a transition to a kind of 0 point. And during this period, the old usually leaves. While the new has not yet taken shape, we cannot quite grasp it, but it is already felt as a potential. In other words, the new moon is essentially potential. And this is especially important for many of us when we get stuck, when we want change, when we intuitively feel that it's time to start something new or with a clean slate. That is, during the new moon, we can actually plant the seeds of our intentions, because the moon is a symbol of the subconscious, a symbol of emotions or feelings or inner rhythms and desires. And at the moment of the new moon, it gives us the opportunity, as if opening a window of possibility, to set a new program for our life for the coming month, and certainly for the next half year as well. That's why during the new moon, we experience an internal tuning, deciding where our energy will flow in the future, which themes will be relevant, and which processes will be set in motion. And it is precisely during the new moon that it is especially effective to form your desires, set your intentions, manifest, and define the directions for your future development. Now let's look at the specific features of the new moon in the zodiac sign of Cancer. First of all, Cancer is a cardinal water sign that is ruled by the moon. Given that the moon is directly involved in this new moon, this makes the astrological event especially powerful and deeply personal, because the moon is at home here in its own domain, and its qualities are expressed here as vividly and sensitively as possible. And this is a period, more than ever, when our emotions, our intuition, our memories, and our inner needs come to the forefront. And the new moon in Cancer creates a highly sensitive, gentle, yet at the same time very powerful emotional atmosphere during this period. This is not an outwardly bright or active moment, as I mentioned before, but rather a time for deep attunement with yourself, with your needs, with family matters, with your roots, family history, and personal security, especially on an emotional level. In this sense, the new moon in Cancer is like such a home-based reset point. It's a return to yourself, to your origins, to your vulnerability. Let me remind you that symbolically this is the 4th house of the horoscope. This is the place from which we emerge into the physical world. What are the main life themes that will be brought up by this new moon, the new moon in Cancer, aside from what we will consider in specific houses of the horoscope? First of all, it's the theme of emotions and inner security. Cancer is all about emotions. And during the new moon in this sign, emotions become especially vivid, particularly vulnerable, and significant. It is a water sign, and here all feelings, memories, or some painful issues may surface. And it's important not to avoid them, but to give them space, to allow them to manifest. You can cry, you can talk to close people, you can let these emotions go by working through them with creativity or some body practices, even something as simple as a massage. This is a very good time to ask yourself, what truly makes me feel calm, at peace and at ease? And where do I truly and genuinely feel safe? Who or what gives me a sense of home? In addition, the themes of family, ancestry, and motherhood will be relevant here because Cancer is responsible for family ties, for the mother, for the paternal and maternal lineage, for childhood, and for our sense of belonging. And during the new moon, family-related topics may come to the surface. These include relationships with parents, questions about children, the desire to care for others, and the wish to feel protected. This is a very powerful period for practices such as working through ancestral issues, addressing family patterns, accepting and forgiving parents, and setting intentions to create your own family or improve relationships within your family. The new moon in Cancer also brings up questions about our home, both external and internal. We may feel the urge to arrange our living space, change the interior, create coziness, start renovations, or, on the contrary, realize that the space we live in no longer gives us a sense of peace. And this is a very good time to improve your living conditions, actually start renovations, or energetically cleanse your space. It's also an excellent moment to set an intention to create a space of power right in the place where we live. In addition, the theme of self-care and taking care of oneself comes to the forefront. This is a time when the need for warmth, care, acceptance, and specifically acceptance through physical comfort becomes especially strong. And the new moon in Cancer teaches us to be a source of support, not only for others, but also for ourselves. That's why it's very beneficial to take warm baths, get massages, do body wraps, eat warm homemade food, and give yourself internal permission to be slow, to be gentle, and to rest more. The energies of the new moon in Cancer will manifest on 3 levels, and of course in different ways. If we're talking about the mental level, the new moon in Cancer will incline us toward inner observation and a way of thinking where images from the past, memories of childhood, of our parents, or of a lost sense of security may surface. Here, there may be a strong desire to withdraw, to reflect on home, family, and relationships with loved ones. Here we begin to think not rationally, but more intuitively. We have more associations. We might find ourselves thinking about where our emotional nest truly is and what is genuinely important to us. This is a very good time to perhaps, through writing practices, create some memory maps, family stories, or to make a plan for the next 6 months related specifically to home or to shaping the family structure in our lives. If we talk about the emotional level, then of course, as I mentioned, the emotions here will be very strong. This is one of the most sensitive, most vulnerable new moons in our lives. And here it is precisely deep emotions that will surface, emotions we may have either not noticed for a long time or have been suppressing. This could be fears, such as the fear of abandonment, for example, or longing, especially homesickness or nostalgia. Or there may be a heightened need to feel accepted or a desire for more tenderness and care. In other words, our mood will shift very abruptly, especially if we have inner wounds related to our family, our lineage, or our childhood. And the energy of the new moon in Cancer is aimed specifically at emotional cleansing, at rebirth through tears, through honest conversations, through accepting these states of vulnerability. So this is a period when it is very important to treat yourself and others with great care, not to demand, but rather to offer more support. On the physical level, the energies of the new moon in Cancer will manifest as a need for comfort, warmth, and rest. Our body under these energies seems to be asking us to slow down. You want to sleep more, wrap yourself in a blanket, eat more homemade food, and surround yourself with warm scents and a cozy atmosphere. During this time, under these energies, we are very vulnerable, the stomach and the chest area. It is especially important to avoid cold food or stressful situations because your energy levels can drop significantly here. And of course, we want to focus less on taking action and more on recovery. Here, any kind of water treatments, massages, body wraps, anything that involves nurturing, motherly care for the body are especially beneficial. How can we understand and feel whether we are experiencing the energies of the new moon in Cancer in a positive or negative way? First of all, the positive manifestations of this new moon's energy will be expressed, for example, in a deep emotional renewal. That is, we will have the opportunity to completely reset our inner state, let go of old grievances, and create space for something new. In addition, we will be able to strengthen our connection with our family, our lineage, or our home. For example, through traditions or family celebrations. And here we may find ourselves in situations where we take better care of ourselves and others, show gentleness, empathy, and a kind of heartfelt warmth. In other words, we have this desire to support our loved ones, to be there for them in difficult times. Also, under these positive energies, our intuitive understanding of those around us becomes very strong, and it's as if we can sense the emotions and needs of other people. We also have an increased desire for comfort, a wish to arrange and improve our living space. We feel like starting new projects, especially those related to home, real estate, or parenting, in other words, projects connected to feminine energy. And here, of course, there is a very powerful energy of the feminine principle overall. Themes of motherhood, care, and emotional closeness become more prominent. These are all the positive manifestations. If we talk about the negative manifestations, they show up as excessive sensitivity and touchiness. In other words, any word can hurt us. There is a tendency toward emotional outbursts, or we retreat into the past, getting stuck in nostalgia. That is, it feels like we have difficulty letting go of the old. It's as if we idealize or dramatize some previous old experience. We might display passivity, withdraw into ourselves, that is, have the desire to hide from the world, to avoid certain actions or decisions. Or we might engage in emotional manipulation, such as making accusations, playing on pity, or taking on the role of the victim or the rescuer. Increased anxiety about loved ones. This means overprotectiveness, violation of personal boundaries, situations where we can't let go of resentments, fears, or certain emotional traumas, especially those connected to childhood or family history. And on the negative side, we may regress into infantile states. In other words, we might expect that someone else will come and solve our life problems or show us some kind of care. Now let's pay more attention to the ruler of this new moon in Cancer. That is the moon, which is a direct participant in this astrological event. And in general, at the moment of any new moon, the sun and the moon come together. But when this happens in the zodiac sign of Cancer, the moon joins the sun in its own home, and it is at its strongest. It feels at home. It expresses its archetypal qualities and characteristics in the most natural way possible. That is, this is motherhood, care, emotional memory, a sense of belonging, a sense of security. And this new moon is especially moon-centered. That is, the focus is specifically on our inner world, our family, our feelings, our sense of emotional security. And all this lunar theme shown, ancestry, the body, loved ones, our internal life rhythms, the theme of cycles, the theme of nature, they come to the forefront. They manifest much more vividly and strongly than in other new moons. And of course, this heightens our emotional sensitivity. We develop a strong need to put down roots. There is an increased importance placed on the personal and intimate, and a very strong desire to go inward, to immerse ourselves in our subconscious, our intuition, our dreams. And here, of course, there can be potential pitfalls, hyperactivity, or the desire to control everything in our lives through caretaking, or to completely shut ourselves off from anything new, from novelty in our lives. Because Cancer and the moon tend to gravitate toward what is familiar, toward what feels safe. After all, this is the fourth house, and there is a certain foundation for us there. Now, of course, I want to take a look at the symbolism of the fourth degree of Cancer, and also to suggest to you the path along which our development will proceed until the next full moon in the sign of Cancer, which will occur in January of 2026. In other words, this is the path that we can take over the course of this half year, and what this new moon in Cancer is generally aimed at. First of all, the fourth degree of Cancer is depicted as the image of a cat arguing with a mouse. It's a very interesting picture. And here the symbolic image is the cat and the mouse. This is an image that contains a hidden irony. Here the cat and the mouse are, by definition, not equals. One is a predator, the other is prey. But here there is an argument between them, and the mouse is perhaps trying to defend its rightness or its life, while the cat is trying to justify its behavior. Again, there is a hidden irony here, a metaphor for the kind of internal dialogue between our instincts and our reason, between the old animal impulse and a new level of consciousness. What does this actually mean in practice? What does this mean in our lives? Gradus is talking about the internal conflict that arises after making a major turning point decision in our lives. For example, we've already taken some important step. For instance, we've left a toxic relationship, changed jobs, our lifestyle or our belief system. Let's say all of this has already changed, but inside we still have old attachments, desires, certain impulses that aren't so easy to let go of. And then it begins what I usually call bargaining. There's this rationalization, a kind of bargaining between the decisions we've made and the actions we've already taken. In other words, we try to logically explain why we still want something that no longer serves us. It is not effective for our personal development. And essentially, this is an internal struggle between our old self and our new self. when our mind uses excuses to avoid the discomfort of growth, that transitional moment. So what is the potential of the energy of this degree? This symbol reminds us that any path of renewal is not instantaneous. Even after radical changes within us, there remains an echo of the past, and that's normal. This is a stage of rethinking, where it's important for us to acknowledge, yes, I still want something I have already consciously let go of. And the main thing here is not to blame yourself. In general, the energy of this degree helps us to expose our self-deception and the tricks of our mind that prevent us from integrating this new self into our lives. And the potential of this degree lies in the need for honesty with oneself, especially when accepting these inner contradictions without suppressing or rationalizing them. In other words, this is a time when it's important for us to learn to translate our inner truth into conscious action, rather than letting mental chewing gum dominate or getting lost in endless mental arguments. Now let's look to the future and pay attention to the path we'll need to take toward the full moon in Cancer, which will occur in January of 2026. It will be at the 13th degree of Cancer. And here, the symbol is represented as an image of a hand with a protruding thumb extended for examination. This is also a very symbolic image. The image is a hand with a thumb. So this is not just a physical gesture, but an archetype of the manifestation of our human will. For example, in palmistry, the thumb reflects willpower, volitional potential, and a person's ability to stay on course and make conscious choice. So an outstretched hand symbolizes a readiness to be read, an open stance, but at the same time, it is also a test of our personality. Are we ready to withstand scrutiny, judgment, or a difficult situation and still remain true to ourselves? What is the essence of this symbol? The degree speaks to a moment when our character is put to a serious test, and life situations demand self-control from us, require inner resilience, clarity of intention, the ability not to give in to external pressure or to maintain our awareness, to show our will and personal choice, especially when we are strongly tempted to avoid responsibility or just go with the flow. And here, strength of character is more important than knowledge, feelings, or our logic. That is, this is the energy of an active inner center which shapes our personality not through words, but through concrete actions. So, the potential of these degrees energy says that my strength lies in my character, and it is precisely character that is now being formed or tested. That is, life situations arise where you can't rely on other people, where everything depends on our determination, on our ability to stay on the chosen path. It's as if we become the object of study from the world, from circumstances, from other people. And it is precisely our response that shows who we truly are deep inside. This is a very powerful energy for developing maturity, for strengthening self-respect, for asserting personal boundaries. This is who I am. I am ready to show it. How might this play out? Well, in a positive sense, we feel that we've become more resilient, more confident, and we can clearly sense our yes and no. We develop an inner core. And this state commands respect from everyone around us. And in difficult situations, there may be inner doubts, certain fears of being misunderstood, or we might feel external pressure. But it is precisely overcoming these states that shapes our character. And here, the main choice is not to hide your will, but to find a way to express it in a healthy way, respecting both yourself and others. So, The cycle that will begin with the new moon in Cancer at the 4th degree symbolically speaks to us about the inner conflict between the old and the new self. And let me remind you that this is a metaphor precisely for self-justification, self-deception, a kind of mental trap by which we try to convince ourselves that we can remain the same, even though we've already taken a step toward change. In other words, this degree is like a point of bifurcation. On one side are our old desires and instincts, and on the other, the need to follow this new inner orientation. And here there will be an internal struggle, there will be hesitation, a search for justifications, an attempt to reconcile the irreconcilable. Therefore, the first weeks of the cycle will be marked by this kind of emotional uncertainty, when we will have to negotiate with ourselves again and again, rein in our impulses and admit that the past no longer works, and accept the fact that a new path requires a new stable position within us. In 6 months, this process will culminate with a full moon at the 13th degree of Cancer. And during this period, we will undergo a certain test of our character. During this time, we must not only want to change, but truly cultivate within ourselves this inner will, the ability to hold ourselves together, to stick to our course, and not stray from the chosen path. I often say in such situations, stick to your guns. And what at the beginning of the cycle will be an internal struggle or uncertainty for us, by the end of the cycle will turn into a readiness to be seen as we truly are, and to show this mature inner stance, this stable inner core. It's a symbol that by the end of the cycle, we should become someone who can already be taken into account, so to speak, or studied, whose behavior can be interpreted, who is already formed, who is tangible. And simply put, the cycle itself leads us from hesitation and doubt to a steady expression of our willpower. Thus, the entire journey from the new moon to the full moon in Cancer will be a process of inner transformation, when we will first need to let go of illusions, self-deception, or at least recognize them, and then step by step build this new foundation within ourselves. By the way, I would also add that the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in Aries will help us here. The energies resonate with each other quite a lot. And this foundation within ourselves should be based on very clear decisions, on a very distinct sense of identity, on a strong and willful expression of who we are. This is a cycle where we are taught not to hide from new life challenges, but to gradually form a personality that can confidently respond to these challenges. Now, let's look at the significant aspects that will be at play right at the moment of this new moon. And one of the very important aspects is the presence of the planet Jupiter during this new moon. It recently moved into the zodiac sign of Cancer, and here it is in direct conjunction with the Sun and Moon. When, at the moment of the new moon in Cancer, Jupiter joins the Sun and Moon, it gives the event a special power of expansion and growth on an emotional or domestic level. Jupiter, in general, is the planet of luck, abundance, and expansion. On the positive side, and in conjunction with the Sun and Moon, it amplifies the desire to create this warm, protected environment, to support family and loved ones, to develop inner comfort, and to foster emotional security within us. The energies of this conjunction provide powerful inspiration for new beginnings related to home, family, heritage, and caring for loved ones. And it can bring an expansion of our life opportunities precisely through strengthening our roots and our emotional connections. In reality, this conjunction may manifest through situations where we receive strong support from our family or start projects aimed at improving our home life. We may receive good news related to real estate matters or issues concerning children. Here, despite Jupiter's generosity, the only truly important thing in particular is not to, so to speak, go overboard in expressing your concern for security not to slip into excessive guardianship or over control, because there is a very high likelihood of overestimating your own capabilities and creating unnecessary worries. Overall, this conjunction creates a very favorable backdrop for harmonious emotional renewal, for expanding our resources precisely by relying on close people or on our own feelings. The Sun will be in sextile with Mars in Virgo. And this aspect will bring us the energy of very coordinated and productive actions, where our emotional motivation will meet real actions and a practical approach. The Sun in Cancer is about focusing on family, home, care, and inner values. And Mars in Virgo adds pragmatism, organization, attention to detail, and a drive for action. With this aspect, it becomes very easy for us to find a balance between our feelings and our actions. In other words, there is a desire not just to experience certain emotions, but to effectively solve everyday or work-related tasks that are specifically aimed at improving our living conditions. There may be situations when we feel increased productivity, or we may need to pay attention to our health and daily routine, or we may simply need to carry out our plans very carefully and patiently. Because during this period, we tend to express care specifically through concrete actions, helping loved ones, improving our household, or organizing our space. In other words, this aspect promotes very constructive cooperation when our emotions and our will are directed toward creation, toward building things without unnecessary conflicts or tension, but rather in a positive way. This is another aspect of energy that we can use constructively. The Sun will be in a trine to the Black Moon in Scorpio. This is a very powerful energetic flow that connects this gentle, caring energy with the intuitive power of the Black Moon, even with a mystical and transformative force. It's a very harmonious aspect, a harmonious connection that helps us to reveal and accept our dark sides, the aspects of our psyche, or the manifestations of subconscious fears and suppressed desires without that inner judgment. Under the influence of this aspect, our capacity for emotional honesty and deep intuition is enhanced. All of this brings us inner healing, cleansing us from certain psychological blocks. In life, this might manifest, for example, as a very strong attraction to something mysterious. This could be related to psychology, esotericism, or various spiritual practices. In this regard, we become bolder in expressing our true nature. And it's as if we turn on, we activate what was previously hidden and suppressed. This aspect helps us accept both our vulnerability and our strength at the same time, making the process of our personal growth easier. There is also another supportive energy present here. The Sun in Cancer will be in a trine with the asteroid Vesta in Scorpio. And here we see a very harmonious combination of the energy of care and protection with themes of devotion, inner fire, focus, and loyalty to one's values. Let me remind you that Vesta, especially in Scorpio, symbolizes the flame of the inner realm, the theme of loyalty specifically to one's deepest convictions. And in the manifestation of this aspect, we have the opportunity to deeply immerse ourselves in questions or relationships that are important to us, and to show genuine care precisely through devotion and the expression of responsibility. That is, under this aspect, we can work on cleansing ourselves from old emotional wounds and at the same time treat our inner resources with great care, strengthening our spiritual foundations. In reality, there may be situations where we have the opportunity to focus on important projects that require patience and our inner strength. And we can also establish trusting relationships with those around us, which will be built precisely on such deep understanding and on themes of loyalty. Overall, this aspect supports those who strive for self-improvement, specifically through emotional honesty and these kinds of deep personal transformations. This aspect in particular will work very much to our advantage. Among the challenging aspects, we have the opposition of the Sun to the retrograde asteroid Pholus in Capricorn. This is a tense aspect that creates an energetic challenge for us. And it is connected precisely with the conflict between our inner emotional needs and certain external obligations or limitations or some kind of external pressure, because the asteroid Pholus is about trials, past mistakes, and the need for rethinking. And considering that it is also in retrograde motion, it points to the need to do precisely this deep inner work with questions of our discipline, responsibility, and long-term goals. And when we have an opposition of these energies, they are in conflict with each other, provoking both internal and external conflicts within us, conflicts between the desire to protect our feelings and needs and the demands of society, work, career, or those situations where we need to follow strict rules and limitations. And with this aspect, the contradictions between, for example, family responsibilities and professional tasks become especially acute. That is, we need to pay attention to certain mistakes of the past, but look at them from a new perspective. Because retrograde Venus intensifies the need for this kind of revision, correction, or liberation from certain old behavioral patterns that actually hinder our inner harmony. And in order to get through this aspect in a way that's beneficial for yourself, it's important to seek a balance between your personal emotions, feelings, and external demands. In other words, you need to find balance. You need to honestly conduct some self-analysis and not be afraid to look at your own mistakes so that you can build your future in a more mature and stable way. It's also important to keep in mind that all aspects affecting the Sun also apply to the Moon, because the Sun and Moon are in conjunction at the moment of the new Moon. And this means that our consciousness and our subconscious are now working together as a team. And also, accordingly, these aspects are relevant for Jupiter as well, since it is also a participant in the new moon and is part of this conjunction. Therefore, Jupiter will further amplify and expand the energies of these aspects many times over. And here we have a trine between Jupiter in Cancer and the Black Moon in Scorpio. And of course, it amplifies this deep emotional and spiritual expansion of ours through powerful acceptance of our shadow side, through embracing intuition and its manifestations. Here, Jupiter opens up new opportunities for inner growth, for psychological healing. It expands our consciousness while giving us the chance to dive into our subconscious processes to work with our deepest fears and desires. A very powerful impulse for spiritual growth. This can be done through esotericism, psychology, various practices, and by freeing yourself from all these old limitations, specifically through understanding your own dark nature. There is also a trine from Jupiter to Vesta in Scorpio, of course, and to retrograde Pholus in Capricorn. Here, the energy towards Vesta gives us increased devotion, loyalty, and the energy to achieve our most important goals related to home, family, and spiritual mission. Because Jupiter will, in a way, expand Vesta's possibilities in terms of concentration and expressing this inner fire, and will provide support for long-term projects. I would say that this is a good time to start a family, get married, or plan for pregnancy. There is also a very strong harmonization of inner strength happening, and this gives us the opportunity to move forward while feeling the purpose behind what we are doing. If we talk about the opposition to Pholus, then here Jupiter will amplify these contradictory energies, this dilemma between our desire for growth, expansion, abundance, and the need to rethink some of our past mistakes, some of our old limitations. Jupiter, in this case, will incline us toward overestimating our opportunities or give us excessive optimism. But retrograde Pholus will remind us that responsibility is important, discipline matters, and it's essential to adjust our path, our course. And of course, it's important to engage in self-analysis here. Of course, it's important here to seek a balance between our ambitions and our actual resources and opportunities, and to get rid of anything outdated. In the next video, we'll look at how the new moon in Cancer affects all 12 zodiac signs. I wish you success. Subscribe, like, and share this video. See you soon.